All things positive come from the Holy Ghost. All things negative come from the adversary and ourselves, because we're fallen and we're there. We're meant to be. And we get down on ourselves too much because, I made a mistake. Well, you were meant to. But that's why we have a Savior. That's why we have something to cling to in our moments of sadness, of failure, of death. I remember in those moments, I had my bad moments, even on my glory days, we'll call it that. The little song that was sung by Michael McLean as, I'm not alone. The refrain would run through my head over and over and over, artillery rounds landing, roadside bombs going off. And I just hear in a little back of my head,
You're not alone.
You're not alone. And we're not.
Even though right now you're on your own.
Exactly.
Yeah. In our podcast, Hearing the Unheard, Stories of Transformation, we discuss a variety of sensitive subjects such as suicide, suicidal ideation, self-harm, abuse, and faith crisis. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to our podcast, Hearing the Unheard, Stories of Transformation, presented by Pause Wellness. I'm your host, Eric Stauffer, and I'm very glad to introduce to you our new guest, Jeron Tree. Hi, Jeron.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you.
That's a standard answer, right? Thanks for having me.
That's right. That's what all the guests say.
Right.
And I say the same thing every time
easy.
we introduce. So let's start by you sharing with us a little bit about your background. Tell us about your upbringing, etc.
Okay. I'll try to keep a lot of information into a really short amount of time, but basically I was born in Ogden, Utah. My parents believed in having a large family, so I was number 4 out of 9 kids. Born in Ogden, raised all over the Intermountain West, up into Oregon, Nevada, and then I graduated high school out of Heber City, Utah. So from there, really just kind of joined the military. Spent the next 23 years kind of jetting around the world, seeing new places and meeting new people, and brought us back to Utah here. My wife and I, we have 4 boys, and my wife is an amazing lady. She's a nurse here locally. And it's been quite a journey. There's quite a bit that's happened through the time that we've been around the world. We lived in Germany. I've lived in Mexico. I've lived in the Middle East for quite a bit of my time in the military. Spent a lot of time on the East Coast and away from the Utah culture. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a culture shock coming back to Utah, really. Mm-hmm. So my experience has been pretty broad, and been a lot of different places and met a lot of different people. I've found that people are generally the same all around. Mm-hmm. There's different cultures, there's different behaviors, different ways of thought, but everybody kind of wants the same things. We all want to find joy. We all want to find happiness. We all want to find our place in this world. And oftentimes, even though that's such a universally recognized thing, we can't find it. And I've looked in a lot of different places. I've talked to a lot of people in different places of the world, different religions, different belief systems, and the universal search for happiness is not so universal as far as finding it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's all we're all trying to do is find our place.
Yeah, as someone myself who's predominantly lived in Utah my whole life, I've learned that there's so much power in conversing with someone who has a more global experience, who's been exposed to more things. Sometimes we feel like oneness is sameness.
Right.
But sometimes oneness, well, hopefully we understand that oneness can still exist with all kinds of diversity.
I think the oneness you're talking about, in my experience, is a certain light that everyone carries. Now, if you're religious or not, for me, I am religious. I believe that is the light of Christ. Everyone carries it. And I have been around the world. You see it in their eyes, and you see those who have stamped it out in themselves. And they are a terrible visage to look upon. You see the death in their eyes and the dearth of kind thoughts or any other thought for other people than their own pain, their own suffering, and they want to take anybody with them. But yeah, the light is out there. It is there, and it's just waiting to be awakened in so many people. And it is amazing blessing to see when that light comes to the front in people. And sometimes you can attribute it to yourself and your own words and actions, usually when our ego's gotten up there, but mostly it's because they were touched by something that came through us to them.
Yeah.
If we carry the light to them. And it's amazing to see.
Oh, that's great. What branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Army.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I joined here in Utah, and I spent about a year in a local reserve unit as a combat engineer. From there, I kind of really enjoyed the military, and I wanted to further my career in that. And honestly, I wanted to see what it had for me. And so I went active duty from there, and they wouldn't let me come in as a combat engineer. They said, "Oh, we're full-on combat engineers." And I was like, "Well, can I go infantry?" And nobody's ever believed me about this. They said, "Well, we don't have any infantry slots available." I was like, "Well, you got to be kidding me. Everybody goes
Uncle
infantry.
Sam needs you."
Yeah, exactly. You hear everybody say, "Well, we need infantry. We need the ground troops." And nope, they didn't have them available when I went. And they said, "Well, you can be a linguist. You could be an intelligence guy. Your scores are decent, so you could do pretty much anything you wanted." And I was like, "Well, what's a combat arms MOS that you've got? Military occupational specialty. What you do in the military?" And they're like, "Well, we have this cool one. It's cavalry scout." And they made it sound amazing. Get on motorcycles and ride behind enemy lines and, ride dune buggies and do really cool things. And what I didn't notice is they said it's Armored Reconnaissance Specialist is the actual title. So I ended up on tanks.
Oh, really?
Not my favorite thing.
Oh, wow.
But I did that for 3 years. Kind of got tired of that one. That's not really what I signed up to be. I wanted, as dumb as it sounds, I wanted to be a grunt carrying a backpack. And I got to do a little bit of that in cavalry, but I kind of missed or wanted the experience of carrying a rifle and going through the mud. And my dad thought I was crazy. He's like, I joined the Air Force, so I didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And, I have a long line of military service in my family, most of them Air Force or Navy. And I was the only weirdo that joined the Army. I had a younger sister follow me in, but she was hurt early on in her career and got out. So I spent a couple of years trying to go to school, trying to find my place. And even then, I've only had one deployment to the Middle East during that time. I couldn't really fit back in. So I spent a couple of years kind of bouncing around and eventually went back in the military after joining the National Guard again and going to Special Forces. So I was in 19th Special Forces Group down in Salt Lake. And I couldn't balance it well. And I wanted to put a lot more effort towards that. And I wanted to be Special Forces because while I was in, I went to the chow hall. We were in Kuwait, and these guys walk in, and they are these tall, fit guys in uniforms that were modified, and they didn't have name tapes on, and they didn't have rank on, and everybody was just like, what are these guys doing here? Who are they? And eventually it just turned out that it was a Special Forces team that was there to do whatever their mission happened to be. And I was like, I want to be like those guys. I want to be the best. I want to be somebody that people can rely on and send in first to find out what's going on, then send in to recruit and help oppressed people become free again. Special Forces motto is de oppresso liber, which is to free the oppressed. And I was like, man, I want to be that guy. Well, I ended up getting out for various reasons, but I wanted to continue my education, and it's really hard to do in the military. But that didn't quite work out either. So I went back in, went to Germany, still as a cavalry scout, still on armored vehicles, which was not my favorite thing. And then I went to a Special Forces selection in 1997 and was selected to go to what they call the qualification course, where I was also selected to be a medical sergeant. And then in 1998, did I say 2000?
97 and then...
Okay, 97 and 98, I went to jump school, and then I went to the Q course in Fort Bragg. And then through the Q course, I was there for 2 years. So it's not a short course. It's a year long just to become a medic. And then you have language course. My language was Russian. I didn't tell them I spoke Spanish because I didn't want to be in 7th group, which was the Spanish speaking group. And they sent me to Russian to learn that language. And then they sent me to 10th Special Forces Group in Colorado Springs. And that was the most amazing 5 years of my life. I spent 5 years going to war with a group of guys that were incredible. They sacrificed everything to be where they were. And no job was too big and no job was too small. And they gave me the desire to be better than I was. My total service, I spent probably better than 2 years in active combat duty stations, or not duty stations, what we would call deployments. And these men, I always wanted to exemplify them, which took me away. Oddly enough, it took me away from my beliefs and my religion for a while, and actually contributed later on to some of the struggles I had. But during the time I was there, it was amazing. It was everything I ever wanted out of life, in Special Forces on a team with men I could trust and who trusted me and were willing to go test our mettle against everyone, all comers. It didn't matter who it was.
Let's talk about where do you think that those ideals for you came from, that you kind of had this vision of what you wanted to do and a specific assignment and the preferences and the willingness to enter into danger? Where does that come from? Because to me, I'm more of a coward, right? I just don't have that natural instinct. It doesn't feel like for me.
I don't ever remember a time in my life where I wasn't excited to run towards the sound of gunfire, if that makes any kind of sense. My religion kind of gives the father an ability to give his sons blessings. And from an early age, my father would always add into his blessings that I was a warrior, that I would be a warrior in the service of my country, in the service to my God, and in the service of my family and all of those around me. So I guess from an early age, my expectation was only to be a warrior. I didn't understand fully what that meant, obviously, as a child, but it was sadly really easy for me to go to war.
Instinctual.
It was something I embraced it. It was exciting, and it was something that mattered. And I was freeing people in my mind. I was freeing them from the oppression that they had suffered under. And I was doing my purpose. And I think we lose that a lot of times. We do our 9-to-5 grind. We go to work. We fill out paperwork. We send it in. We make sure this money gets over there and this bill gets paid. And we forget that we have a purpose here. And I was fulfilling my purpose. And again, it's kind of odd, a little bit of a juxtaposition where my purpose came from my father through a religious blessing. Maybe not completely that, but that spoke to my soul. But I left that religion to pursue that purpose.
Interesting.
So I separated my spirit, oddly enough, from my physical presence, my physical being. Not always. I tell a story when I go and I talk to kids about this, or I'm invited to talk about my service. I carried with me a little service member's copy of my scriptures. Even into northern Iraq, when we flew in Operation Ugly Baby is what they called it. It's Viking Hammer is the actual name of the operation. I flew in the back of a C-130 over enemy lines, through enemy fire, lost an engine. Our plane was shot so full of holes, they sent it back to the United States to figure out why it was still flying and cut it into pieces and analyzed it. And we had a weight limit. I carried off of that C-130 into northern Iraq, 129 pounds on my back without my med bag, which was another 60 pounds. And then me and a buddy carried off a bag between us that had 3 rocket reloads for the ordnance we were carrying and a bunch of grenades and batteries and ammunition. And we carried off, all told, about 240 pounds off of that aircraft when we landed in Sulaymaniyah, northern Iraq. And I made room for those scriptures. Even though I wasn't doing all of the things that it asked me to do, I had that belief. And it kind of sat in the back, and I pushed it back there. But it never fully went away.
Never left you.
Never
fully.
left me. Yeah.
So you felt like there was this kind of destiny, almost like an identity that you felt from an early father's blessing that carried with you. You have a long tradition of military service in your family. And then it sounds like you had some kind of crossroads moment of where you feel like you left the religion for a while to be able to do that. Let's talk about that.
I don't know if it was to be able to do that. I've known since then, I've had a few friends and mentors who balanced it beautifully. They struggled still, obviously, but still held their belief and their faith close to them as they completed their service. And a part of me wishes that I had done the same thing. But I had the opportunity to meet one of those gentlemen who was one of my mentors, who kept his faith and was continually in the service of not only men, but of God at the time. And it sometimes it's pretty humbling. And a lot of times I carried that shame, though, that I wasn't being true to what I believed and who I was. Here I was, one of the best soldiers recognized in the entire world, and I couldn't justify who I was to myself or to anybody else. If they asked, I wouldn't even tell people what I did. I wanted to epitomize everything that it stood for. And, now I'm talking about it, but we consider special forces, there's a saying, we're the silent professionals. We don't go out and talk about what we did. We don't talk about our capabilities. We don't talk about anything that would lead people to believe that we did anything more than just complete our service. But those men that I served with were incredible. But I left a part of me behind. And when I watched people going to combat, I could almost point out to which ones would have trouble after combat. They lacked a good foundation. They lacked a belief, whether it's a religious belief or in something, just a belief in something higher than themselves.
Something outside of themselves.
Something outside of themselves. If they were too turned inwards about what their own knowledge of, and I say knowledge kind of tongue-in-cheek, of the world, and they would go out unprepared. And they would have to engage and hurt other people in the name of freedom. Now you think about that, that just doesn't compute in your brain. Because if you don't have a higher belief, you don't have an understanding of why you're there, you're going to suffer, because there's horrible things that happen in war. If anybody tells you that war is an answer, they have never been to war. It is an answer, but it should be the ultimate answer, and only if you're being aggressed or somebody's trying to attack you, because it is not. It destroys young men. It takes away from them their identity. Separates them from their families and has them go do things that most people can't even imagine. And then they're asked to come back and just reintegrate with no understanding of what they just did. So these young men come back and they have never believed in something more, and they lose everything. Even if they had a small belief before, it's gone. And those are the ones that we end up losing. And right now I think that the average is we lose 22 veterans a day to suicide. They can't handle going forward. But the other thing is that they have been detailed to be a protector. And they've lost who they are. And the only thing they can hold on to is their protector. And that's why you don't see veterans going and shooting up schools or malls or going and attacking people, because they have been a defender and they've stood on that wall and they want that courage and honor and their values to mean something. So they don't take it out on other people. They've become the threat. So now they take it out on themselves and they finish their mission in their minds.
So maybe, is it that where they've found this identity of being a protector of others, they feel like they forget to protect themselves? They forget to care for themselves? What happens mentally and emotionally, do you think, that leads to that kind of thinking?
This is going to be a hard conversation for me.
Yeah.
You come back to loved ones and you're angry. And you have a hard time showing them your love. And everything impacts you differently. And things that wouldn't originally make you angry or upset in any way are all of a sudden triggering. And you start hearing yourself yell at your children or arguing with your wife about things that just don't matter. And you start seeing yourself as a threat to your wife and your children or your parents or your brothers and sisters, because now I'm always at odds with them. This is how I felt towards the enemy when I was in combat, but I love them. Now you're in two worlds. And instead of going to find help, they rely on their own experiences and their own abilities to deal with the problem. And all they see is their children crying and their wife crying. And now you're the threat.
Now you're the enemy.
Right.
Yourself.
Exactly.
Why do you think that the anger is there for veterans? What is it about being engaged in those experiences that you come home? Is it that you're starkly aware of the inability of everyone to understand what it is that you've been through? So it's like lack of empathy or lack of connection? Or is it seeing the hate in the world and so it makes you angry that it's existing?
I think it's a combination. I think there's a lot of that in it as well. But I also think you're kind of lost. There isn't anything really you can do. If you asked for help while you were in, you got pulled off. You weren't able to go out with your guys. You'd lose security clearance. You'd be a pariah in the military.
So getting help is almost frowned upon.
Oh, absolutely. You'll lose your security clearance. You'll lose the confidence of the men around you. You'll lose the confidence of your command. You'll basically lose your career.
So if you go for that reason, those great motives that you feel like you have, what you're standing for, and then you experience the collateral damage of that cause,
right?
You feel like your whole purpose is threatened. So you don't even want to let anyone know.
Hey, a lot of guys just bury it in
so you
alcohol,
just bury it.
Alcohol, substance abuse,
self-medicate.
Fighting. I mean, we're guys that run towards the sound of guns, not run away. We're aggressive people. How do you deal with that? You fall into the things that you're more comfortable with. I'm comfortable with aggression. I'm comfortable with violence. I'm comfortable with, what most people aren't, is confrontation. How do you bring that back? The other part of it is I think we're changed. And I don't think we're broken. If I look out at the veteran population, I don't see broken people. I see people that lack understanding of what has happened to them. And they're looking for an answer, and there's very few people out there that are willing to even delve into it and find a real answer. They're more willing to throw medication at it.
Right.
Instead of, your brain chemistry has changed. You've been in fight or flight mode, and there has been some breakthroughs in that because of all the things that have been happening lately. But How do you treat it? Well, I don't know. Send me back to combat. That's where I'm most comfortable. But then I miss my family.
Yeah.
Now I'm too old.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's what do you do after everything you've wanted to do and accomplish in your life, and you've done it, and you come home and now you're a different person. You don't fit in where you thought you did.
Yeah.
And now you've gone from being somebody with a purpose, with people around you who share that purpose, and you're all pulling towards the same goal. Mostly, there's a few odd swimmers out there, and now you're not.
Yeah. Wow.
What do you do then?
Yeah.
And especially after you're out, you can go seek medical health mental health help afterwards.
Because it's not at a risk of losing your opportunities.
Right. So it's just like any time you've ever gone on a long run and you're pushing through and you're like, I'm going to finish this run, but you get to the end and then you collapse.
Yeah.
Because your physical body has had enough and you made it go past its normal expire by date,
Yeah.
if you want,
Yeah.
or its normal abilities. And then that all catches up to you. So here we are 23 years later in my case. And now you're left with, hey, here's a few job transition opportunities. Have good luck out there. See ya. And so that's all they really consider is, are you going to get a job after you get out? Are you going to be able to make a paycheck? They don't consider what you've been through. There's no consideration to how do we bring that back? How do we take care of our mental health as well as our physical health?
There needs to be some better form of transition and bridge.
Absolutely.
For that circumstance.
Well, mentally, what do we do for preventive medicine in the mental world? We know that 10% of patients, as a medic myself and as a medical professional, 10% of patients take up 90% of the resources and time. Those 10% typically aren't just coming in for physical reasons. If we were able to do more for mental health to begin with, I don't even know what it would be. Learn meditation. Learn to understand that all the thoughts that come into your head don't need to be acted on, and that are not true, and that the negative thoughts are usually coming from an external source, and the positive thoughts are the ones we need to be paying attention to and forgetting. But nobody teaches you that.
Yeah.
In basic training, in fact, they're screaming at you to do something in a certain amount of time, to get things done, and to be disciplined. And they're talking about morals, values, ethics, those kinds of things that make a good soldier. But they're not concerned about your mental health. I mean, in basic training, I had 6 guys attempt or succeed in suicide.
Just in basic
training.
Wow.
And this is in 1990. And it's gotten worse since then.
Yeah.
We don't pay attention to the mental health. Or maybe, conversely, we pay too much attention to it. And instead of saying, hey, here are healthy habits, well, let's just go see the therapist. Let's just throw medication at it. Let's just put a Band-Aid on it. Instead of, hey, here's a good coping skill. Prayer, meditation, higher belief, understanding of the world around you, understanding of the changes that you're going to go through, who you are going to be when you're done with this, and how do we plan for that? Anybody could benefit from something like that,
right.
No matter what career choice you make, or if you go to combat, or if you go to be an engineer or a doctor or a police officer.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned police officers. I did that for a short time after getting out of the military. It's rough. I loved it. I loved doing that. But because of other issues that I had, I wasn't able to continue to do that.
Yeah.
We look at all aspects of life as we go through, in my experience, and everybody has their struggle. But we don't look at other people and go, I wonder if that person's struggling. We just look at them and go, oh, that person just cut me off. Or, I got to wait in line behind these people that are taking forever. We don't look at people as people.
Yeah.
We see them as obstacles. We see them as, at best, an ally, at worst, an enemy. We don't embrace that other people have the same issues we do, that they're not more important or less important than us, but about the same. How do we get people to understand that?
Yeah.
I think that's a huge step forward in mental
Absolutely.
health. If we can just get people to see other people as we see ourselves.
Yeah.
Go back to the golden rule. We treat others the way we want to be treated.
Yeah.
But it's kind of gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
When I was in school, probably you too, we were taught that, hey, stop doing that to whoever you're doing that to, and think about how you would feel if you were that person and they were doing that to you. Now it's just, all right, let's call in the parents, have some counselors, have some things go bad, and then we'll put the kid back in class no matter what they're doing, if they're hurting other kids or if they're physically or verbally abusive.
Yeah.
And I know that, my 4 boys, they bring home stories every day. I'm in shock.
Yeah.
And me being who I am, I want to go to war.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not the right answer either. But how do we balance that?
More healthy approaches.
Healthy approaches.
So, Jeron, walk us into a little bit of your own personal mental health struggles that have come because of your experiences.
That's going to take a little bit of backstory. I'll make it brief. In 2009, I was deployed to Iraq in support of our mission there, and I had taken a leadership position. I had been given a team that was having some issues, and I was recognized as the top of my field and was given that team to help correct the issues that were going on. Well, that was going to take a lot of work. And during that, we were in a combat zone. We were on a mission, and we had an accident. A vehicle rolled over. My gunner was killed. One of my teammates was killed, and he was sitting up in the gun. And I was thrown on my head from 15 feet in the air, and was unconscious for quite some time, was pulled out. And because of that, because it was a team that I was trying to reconstruct, which isn't the easiest thing to do in the world, they had a lot of hard feelings towards me and used that opportunity to basically tell command and leadership that I wasn't to be trusted as a leader. So that alone was one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with in my life. And then on top of that, I'd received, on top of a bunch of other injuries, brain injuries, I had a traumatic brain injury, which is, if you look at I can't even remember the name of what I'm talking about.
Like
but
the data or
the data,
studies,
the TBI and the PTSD are very similar in everything that happens with that. So I had been to combat for years prior to that. Wasn't a stranger to it, but I came home different, and I had been married to my wife for 3 years prior to that, and I was a different person. And she says that quite often, or used to say that quite often before I started getting treatment that actually helped me. She said, I didn't recognize the person that came home from that deployment. Things like anger, easily frustrated, focusing on the negative, especially about myself. I blamed myself for deaths of my teammates, survivor's guilt. If you go down the list of all the things that can happen to a combat veteran coming home, and then add on top of that losing your career. I was on the fast track to go higher in my career and lost that even. So now I had a purpose. We talked about that earlier. And now my purpose has been stripped. And now my only purpose is to survive long enough to retire. And that's, to me, that was an anathema. That was hard for me to swallow because I had always just charged in. I worked 14, 16-hour days every day. I trained. I kept physically fit. I'd gone through a religious return to my religion prior to this. In 2006, I was an instructor and passed my local congregation every day. And every time I would pass, I would just hear, you need to go. You need to go back. You need to go back. You need to go back. Every day. And one day I was like, okay, I'm just going to stop and I'm going to sit here. And the question came into my mind, you believe in your religion, right? You believe in the scriptures, right? And I had to answer, of course, yes, I do. Yeah. Then why aren't you doing the things that it's telling you to do? So I had returned to the church. I had gotten married. I had started having a family. I had 2 boys by the time I deployed in 2009, and then everything from there on went sour. And I was mad. I was angry about losing my career. Everything was more difficult.
Did you feel like your return to your faith was a cause of the challenge? Like, was there anger at God?
Not even.
Really?
I know that sounds really weird, but I think that it was, if I hadn't had that, I wouldn't be here today. If I hadn't had my faith and I hadn't had my wife, which I believe through prayer and through God's intervention, she came to me because she is perfect for me, I wouldn't be here. I would have either gone and done something else within those years of war. I had opportunities to go work with the CIA ground branch. I had opportunities to go work with some other organizations, be recruited in as a contractor to go back to war. I did do some contract work, but just in training after a while. No, I would have gone to the point where I was either killed in combat or I became too much of a threat to people at home around me, and I would have done something else if I didn't have a return to my religion. But I also had children.
Yeah.
And I did not want to leave my kids with that legacy. I've seen what it's done to other families. I've had friends that have had fathers or brothers or loved ones do it. I've had friends that have done it. And the impact of that cannot be understated. In the military community right now, we suffer from that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, pretty much every other day I hear of somebody I knew and served with who has decided to end their life early or has died of cancer, which seems to be the main thing that we die of. But it's just almost every other day you hear about deaths. And if you don't have some kind of faith or belief in that we're here temporarily, and this is just a test, and this is just a place to learn, man, I can't even imagine those people that don't have a faith in something bigger than themselves existing through that. I can easily understand why they would take their own lives.
Well, it's interesting because even as you documented times when you were away from your faith, you had purpose, you had a vision, you had a goal, you knew you had this kind of calling in your life. And so it's hard, as you know, sometimes when we are people who believe in those purposes, it's hard to see hope when we lose purpose. It's why even without faith, when we lose purpose, it can be so detrimental.
And it's not black or white. We don't disbelieve or believe all the way. We have variations in there. I mean, I never lost my faith that God exists, that Jesus Christ was his son, is his son, and still lives. I never lost that faith. But I wasn't doing the things that would bring me closer to him. I wasn't doing the things that could afford me the protection of angels. But my mother did. My family did. And they prayed so hard, I couldn't get in a fight often. I'd be like, I actually called my mom one time and I'm like, hey mom, you need to stop praying so hard to keep me out of danger because I can't do my job. Throwing the accent there, but I need to have a little bit of danger to be able to go do my job. Thank you very much. So I know that faith exists. And then I did some work afterwards with some nonprofits, and I went to dangerous situations and terrible things. And before I would go on each mission, I said, Heavenly Father, help me do my job. Help me help these people. And don't let me remember anything that I don't want to remember. Because there's some horrible, horrible things that people do to each other. And I don't. It's like somebody was standing in front of me. And I remember those moments. I remember how horrified I was. But I don't remember having to see it. Because that would just be way too much.
That's an amazing protection.
It is.
There's a verse in John says that, but the Comforter whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I've said unto you. So this capacity of the Holy Ghost to protect our memory in some circumstances and to bring things to our remembrance when we need it.
All things positive come from the Holy Ghost. All things negative come from the adversary and ourselves, because we're fallen and we're there. We're meant to be. And we get down on ourselves too much because, wow, I made a mistake. Well, you were meant to. But that's why we have a Savior. That's why we have something to cling to in our moments of sadness, of failure, of death. I remember in those moments, I had my bad moments even on my glory days, we'll call it that. And the little song that was sung by Michael McLean was, I'm not alone. The refrain would run through my head over and over and over, artillery rounds landing, roadside bombs going off. And I just hear in a little back of my head,
You're not alone.
You're not alone. And we're not.
Even though right now you're on your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the guys that suffered the most didn't have that.
No reminder.
No reminder. No, this is who you are. Return with honor. And you go to war, you do horrible things. War is ugly. And when you fight war properly, you fight to win. And winning doesn't always mean, the Queen's rules, prize fighting. You go out there to win. And there's some bad things that happen. You hold on to your morality, you hold on to your ethics and your values, and there's still things that happen that will haunt you. But you have to maintain yourself and know that there are other people that love you and still see you as value, as if you have value. That's one of the lessons I try to teach my kids. A $20 bill thrown on the ground, stomped on, placed in mud, placed in a sewer is still a $20 bill. How much more value do we have upon a person? They all have their value. But it seems like in politics today and in life and in school, we try to devalue those around us instead of let's lift each other up.
What's interesting about doing these podcast interviews is everyone has their own story. Mm-hmm. And what's so powerful about it is if I'm a listener and I'm skeptical of faith or I'm skeptical of God, and that's maybe my own story or someone else's own story, but your story is your story, and no one can tell you that you're not feeling or experiencing or discovering what it is that you're discovering. So there's this real power in giving this microphone, so to speak, to people to explain what has helped them. And that's a powerful thing for you to just be able to say, here's what it is. This is what helped me, and this is why.
There's really two things that I can attribute to me still being here and still fighting the fight, because I still struggle. I still have bad days and I have great days. One is a belief in God and my faith that He is there and He exists, and I have felt His Spirit upon me. And number two is the people around you who are trying to help you. Some people are less helpful because they don't try to understand first. They just assume things. And sometimes it's just sitting there in silence with somebody and just letting them feel your love and your compassion for them and their circumstances. I don't want people to understand what I've been through. That's a horrible thing to understand. But I want somebody to have compassion, to see me as not broken, but somebody who sacrificed. And we all sacrifice. We sacrifice to have a good life. You sacrifice time and your money and your energy. To have a bad life, you sacrifice your education or your willingness to work. It's both are hard. Choose your heart, I think, is the saying out
that's
there.
That's right. Yeah. Choose your heart.
But in my opinion, everybody I've talked to that has struggled with this, that has been through this, and I've talked to a lot, where they feel valueless, where they can't keep going, where they just want to end it. They don't want to keep moving on. It's the people in their lives who just take the time, not to gain understanding, but to give them compassion, to give them space, but to be there and to give them somebody to lean on. When they're ready, they're going to talk. And it may even horrify you, but just listen and let them work it out. Because we all have the capacity in us. I think personally, I'm not a psychiatrist, but we all have the capacity to work out our own problems with the help of those around us and the understanding that you're not going to try and solve my problems. Because you're like you said earlier, your problem is unique. It's only yours. Nobody can go in there and go, hey, here's how you solve this problem because, this is going to be the best for you. But that's what our medical system does. Here's some medicine. Here's a pill. Go talk to this guy over here. Tell him all your problems. And then we focus on the problems instead of a solution. The solution is get out in nature, exercise, enjoy company of people. Even I'm an introvert, big time. I would rather be in my house, away from people. But I understand that if I just do that, I just start going down.
Yep. The isolation is so devastating.
Reach out. Just say hi.
Even an introvert must reach out and have that connection. We've had this common message from these interviews, and it is this message to the helper, to the associates, to the family members, this reminder of you don't have to fix me. You just have to hear me.
That was exactly what was going on in my head. What you just said was exactly what I heard in my head. You don't have to. It is not up to you. In fact, one of the things that I would put out to caregivers, to doctors, to psychiatrists, you can't fix me. Only I can do that.
Yeah.
Now you can help. You can give some tools, but you can't do it. It's just like any of us that are parents, we all wish we could take the pain and suffering away from our kids, but we would stunt them. We would take away who they are. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
And that's what medications did to me. I mean, I tried just about everything out there, ketamine treatments and what they call it. Now I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically a stimulation thing that you hold on to a couple things and they make vibrations just to kind of change your mindset while you're thinking about good things. Medication as far as pills and sleeping pills, and that's what medicine wants to do, and that's what the military does often enough to guys is, hey, here's some medicine. And then they wonder why guys go blow their brains out. Because then the other reason is they don't even recognize who they are anymore. They don't have a self because that medication suppresses all of that. And that's not an answer. The answer is help them help themselves.
Yeah.
And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I wouldn't give any specifics, but some amazing things out there, and listen to people around you. Maybe somebody has the answer for you. But if I were going to give somebody, either a patient or somebody who's suffering, which all of us are, find somebody who will listen.
Yeah.
And find somebody who will give good advice that speaks more to you. It's along the lines of, I can tell you all day long what pair of shoes you can wear that is the most comfortable pair of shoes, but my opinion of a pair of shoes is way different from yours. But the input helps me to narrow down my search for something comfortable that helps me, that puts me in a position where I can then go on myself.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you for that perspective. So if you were to kind of think about the listener of this podcast interview, and you were to identify what you hope sharing these perspectives and these experiences that you've been through, what you hope it will do, what do you hope it will do?
It comes back to that song. Nobody's alone. We're not alone. We convince ourselves that we are. They are not alone. Their perspective is important. They are important. There's people around them that love them, and they're wanting to help them. Nobody goes through this and does it all by themselves. Not if they're a good person. Not if they've held on to their own values and their own. And even then, you can still come back. It's never too late until it's way past too late and you're poking daisies up, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder if Michael McLean knows that there's a military man who had those words ringing in his head in very important times of his life.
I hope he does.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to him since then. He came to a couple of youth conferences that I was a part of when I was a young man, and they lived in Heber when I was up there. So I knew some of his kids, and they were amazing people.
Yeah.
But if he's listening, he brought the words of Christ to me.
That's
quite
incredible.
a bit. Yeah.
So as a non-military person and a citizen of this country, we have this we hear a story like yours and we just go, man, I haven't done anything to earn what I have. And I just want to thank these veterans. And what advice would you give someone who, as a citizen, hears your story?
Well, first, I wouldn't have any expectation that a citizen needs to earn their citizenship. They're here. Number two, this is what I try to express to people, and it's hard sometimes, but don't thank me. I served and I loved it. Some people don't. There's a lot of people, there are different people in the military. For me, the most important thing people could do, instead of thanking me, is to be the kind of citizen that I would be willing to die for. Somebody who believes in what we've started here in this grand experiment, is willing to speak in public, to learn what it's about, and to exemplify what we've started here. This is unique in the history of the world. This United States is unique. Nobody can discount that. Nobody can change my mind about that. But there's always room for improvement. But be the type of citizen that would make me proud to go stand up and lose my life if I have to. But more than that, I have friends that have lost limbs, that have lost eyesight, that have lost everything in pursuit of defending this great nation. Those are the ones that deserve our help, our thanks, our gratitude. And gratitude can take a lot of different things. And I'm not saying go up and thank them, but maybe try to help them. Maybe just be their friend. Maybe just listen.
Just be that listener. I think about what you've said about, we can see physical challenges that people go through and have deep compassion and be willing to spend so much money for healing there. And maybe one of the best things we can do as citizens is to educate ourselves in understanding mental health in a way that gives us more compassion and teaches us how to be that listening ear for those veterans.
Any medical person worth their salt will tell you that most of the people that are consistent, what we call regulars, they suffer more from mental health than they do physical health, but it affects their physical health.
Yeah.
So why don't we put as much effort into mental health? Why don't we have things that are preventative medicine? We call preventative medicine, but when you say that, what do you think? You think of, well, let's make sure that we have safety gear and exercise and
dieting.
Good eating and right. What do we say that when we think of mental health? What is preventative care in mental health?
Right. Yeah. What are the upstream efforts we should be making now to prevent something from happening? We always wait till we're in despair, and then we want the immediate overnight resolutions to those things, and it's not that easy.
No. I don't have a complete answer. I don't think anybody does, but we have over 300 million people in this United States who are big brains, and they can think of a solution because we have created solutions for so many other problems in this world because we're all allowed to think, well, how do we fix this?
Yeah.
I think you're right. We listen. somebody's big brain bigger than mine can get out there and say,
bigger than mine.
Hey, here's some things we can do to prepare ourselves so we don't end up going down that road.
Yeah.
But I also say the part of that is also we need that opposition. Somebody told me a long time is we need our bullies because they can help us to cement our own attitudes about ourselves despite opposition. You don't get stronger without lifting weights. You don't get better in shape without going out and working out. You don't eat well without making the effort to go to the grocery store and buy foods that are good for you. Mental health takes effort. It's not just something you can go, I'll take my pill and I'll be good. It just leads to bad things.
If we have pain, can we learn to leverage that pain to do something good with it?
Exactly.
Well, I think that's what you've done by sharing your story with us today. Thank you so much, Jeron. I feel like we've got to do another episode because there's so much more to tap into from your experience. But thank you so much for being willing to share that with us today.
Well, I thank you for letting me share and for offering your insight and your observations. It helps quite a bit. And I hope that those that are listening will just pick out the parts that they need. There's not a one-fit solution. Pick the parts you need and the rest, file it aside for maybe when you run into that situation. But I can't thank you enough for setting this up and what you guys are doing here.
Thank you so much. There's lots of parts that will help. So thank you for providing them. We're so thankful that we were able to have Jeron on the podcast. He taught us some great lessons. I think it was very clear how much he believes that being that listening ear and having compassion for individuals who've been through things that we can't possibly understand for ourselves, but that it's not our job to fix and to heal them, that healing can come from other powers, but that there is a lot of healing that can come from listening and loving and being compassionate. He also highlighted some concerning service gaps that he's seeing, not just for military, but for all of mental health, a need for preventative measures and upstream efforts to be made. We hope that all of our listeners know that there are resources available, that there is good therapy combined with good medicine, and that we can, as humans, help each other by being those voices and being those listening ears. Thank you, Jeron. We appreciate you so much.